parcel, Assessors Plat 57-1, lot 96. It's actually a big piece. It's 2.7 acres entirely in your commercial highway district. But when we look closer at the subject property, you can see that there's actually 3 condominium units, the Ocean State job lot. There's a combined unit we refer to as Tempest. It houses both an appliance store, a Subway, and a Thai restaurant. And then ultimately the southernmost unit, unit number 1, which was at one point Yankee Gravel, that is the unit or a portion thereof proposed for the marijuana facility. In terms of our floor plan, you can see that we're proposing to use the entire basement in a portion of the main floor. The area to your right, that is part of the Thai restaurant. In terms of our floor plan, we anticipate everyone is going to enter through the only entrance, which would be right through the main, that front entryway. That's our security check and our ID. And that green area is where retail will be sold. And that'll be the only area other than a restroom that will be able to be accessed by the public. We believe that from prior experience, we anticipate 20 to 25 patients per hour, but at a peak, which is what's important, there could be upwards of 40 with 18 employees. That's the public restroom and the last available area that anyone from the public will be able to pass through. We do have a secure delivery hallway in the rear, and that will allow us to transport things for packaging and fulfillment. We also have vaults proposed for both product and cash. We have different security offices as well as offices in both the basement and on the main floor. We have a bathroom just for the staff through a secure hallway, as well as a staff secure break room. There's also employee restrooms. And back to the original elevation, that's what the building looks like today. We'll be using this portion of it. And just in the rear, that side elevation, we will be filling in some of that area just with bricks, so it looks homogeneous, but we don't want any exterior windows. That's where the packaging and the fulfillment area is. So in terms of the site, we want to utilize the 2 existing ingress and egress on Tower Hill Road. We want to also formalize a little bit ingress egress on Dale Collier. Then ultimately, in terms of parking, when we calculate all of these separate uses on the parcel, per code, you're upwards of 142 spaces required. We have 30 additional spaces at 172, but we'd like to restripe this parking lot and therefore come into compliance with the number of ADA spaces that are required by code. And so we'll lose a couple of spaces for striping, but it will be in compliance with in terms of parking. We're also proposing a crosswalk right to our front entrance for pedestrians, as well as a striping for the dedicated loading space in the rear. In terms of sewer, we plan on utilizing the existing sewer. We had just solicited this from John Schock a couple of weeks ago. We understand that this is not any type of permit. We just wanted the board to feel comfortable that we do have sewer service, and he commented possibly pre-treatment is going to be required. We do have Suez water, domestic and fire protection. We do not plan on changing that. We got a quick letter from Mr. Dowdell that water service is available. Same with, there's an existing hydrant on site that is proposed to remain the same. We recently solicited a letter from Fire Marshal Heiner, who's on today. Again, we understand that that is not an approval and that the building compliance and so forth and so on will be reviewed at a later date. Existing gas service within the building. We also have wall pack lighting and exterior lighting, none of that is proposed to be changed, just for in terms of reference. And then landscaping, we're proposing to have, I will not be in full compliance with the landscape ordinance. We're going to try to the maximum extent practicable to introduce some landscaping. We thought that we would be able to put street trees at some islands and at some entrances, to break up the sea of cars. So in terms of permitting, we do have a ways to go. We're here today just for the PRC advisory. We plan on being in front of the Planning Commission for a DPR review and advisory to zoning in October, later this month on the 24th, and ultimately before the zoning board in subsequent months for a special use permit. If that were to were to come together, we still understand that we've got to go back through building, sewers, water, back through sewer. We go through the Department of Business Regulation. I know that was a lot, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. But we would be happy to answer questions. Our landscape architect is here. The proprietors and the operators of the facility are here, as well as our traffic consultant, if that's something that is of concern.
Mr. Casali, really quick, I just wanted to point out that your schedule that you just showed on the previous slide is about a month premature. You'll not be able to go to planning board on October 24th. That will have to be the November 24th meeting.
Yes, thank you. You're right, Jay. I you know what? I typed that in wrong. November the 24th.
No problem.
Administratively, Joe, if you can get us a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. We don't have that in the packet now.
Yeah, we'll email that over at the right after this meeting.
You can send that to us electronically. That would be good. I'd like to start with John from, if he's still on board. And I apologize, John, because my screen split. If you have any comments or concerns at this juncture.
Yes. So I think my big concern is traffic, and particularly any traffic northbound on 108. There's no stacking provisions for either Dale Collier Street entrance or the two driveway entrances, and I envision gridlock tying up that, I guess it's not really a high speed lane, but because there is no stacking lanes on 108 North. I'd like to hear back from the applicant how they envision that, how to deal with that issue.
If I can just add to that, in the planning department, we had those similar concerns primarily because the two left-hand turning movements on Kingstown Road are not optimal because they directly head into a parking bay. And whether you've explored closing one of those entrances and looking at, we'll say, one primary entrance off of Kingstown Road and a secondary off of Dale Carley Street.
We have not explored that, but it's something, if the community has concerns, we certainly will look into it.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
That was one thing I was going to bring up. That's Dale Collier Street is pretty busy. People in and out of CVS, people cutting through to go to Citizens Bank, and the entrances from CVS and to that shopping center are offset from each other. And if you're going to re-landscape that spot, I'm wondering if we could line that up a little better. What do you think about that, John? Would that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, the intersections aren't very close together, that's for sure. I'm just looking at GIS while we speak here. I mean, to line those up would be a significant challenge.
Okay.
Well, this is Paul Bannon. John, what would you try to line up?
No, I think the suggestion was made, can you line up Dale Collier Street with the Dale Collier Driftway across on the east side of Kingston Road?
I was talking about with CVS, the entrance there on Dale Collier. It's just kind of opposite to the shopping center entrance.
Yeah, well, we wouldn't want to move our driveway closer to the intersection. We're centrally located on Dahlia Collier, away
Mm.
from any stacking for turning onto Kingstown or onto Holly. So we're at a better location on Dale Collier for unimpeded access.
Yeah. It's just that entrance there is, it does have a divider, but it's people walking across there. It is,
Well,
It
we've
is tricky.
recommended cleaning that up as part of our study. Those parking spaces that are on Dale Collier are on town property. They're essentially on-street parking. We've recommended that a couple of the angle parking spaces adjacent to the driveway be either reconfigured or removed, just to clean up the driveway for sight distances for people and for vehicles turning in and out of there. It's been a low turnover plaza. It's a big plaza with lots of parking, so we don't see that as an issue. And as Joe indicated, we don't anticipate high volumes of traffic associated with this business once the 9 centers are up and operating. This property itself in the commercial district offers many points of access and egress, whether off of Holly, Dale Collier, or Kingstown Road. So we don't see any concentration of traffic or congestion, especially on a 4-lane road that allows cars that are through traffic to go around any turning traffic. As Joe indicated, we can look at the multiple points of access on Kingstown Road. But again, it's a multi-unit plaza. There's more than one entity that's involved. So it can be explored, but it's not just a single owner. Okay, we can take care of that. But, the plaza was put in a long time ago as Benny's, and that's what they put in. So we would have to review that with the other owners and the DOT to see if a condensed main access on 108 was desirable.
A question I have, Jamie Rabbit. Since it is a condo development, you are proposing to seal the pavement and in essence restripe 80% of the parking in front of the 3 units. Do you have permission to do that right now?
I couldn't speak to that, but I would say that as a benefit versus a driveway closure, which would be impactful to the other potential tenants. I see that what we're doing is as a maintenance and enhancement to the plaza versus a change in access.
well, there is very little landscaping there, so any landscaping would be an
Yeah.
improvement.
Yeah.
John, do you have anything else, or is that your primary concern?
Yeah, I mean, not to be redundant, I think northbound 108 traffic trying to access that property is the issue. And I don't know how you're gonna solve it.
Well, John, there's more than one driveway.
I
Make
understand,
that
Paul,
movement.
but
You
none
have
of
Dale
those,
Collier, you have 2 driveways and School Street.
none of those driveway entrances have a stacking lane on 108.
You don't need, you have a 4-lane road, John.
So what if they're gonna be stacking in the travel lane, and so people who don't want to stack behind a car waiting queue to take a left-hand turn into the plaza is gonna try to go around and deal with the other traffic coming in the low-speed lane.
That's a common occurrence on a 4-lane
No.
road, John. Not every road most roads don't have dedicated turn lanes into commercial driveways. That's an uncommon occurrence.
I don't know if that's an uncommon occurrence, Paul. It certainly doesn't exist here, and that's my concern. If there's an intensification of traffic northbound on 108 turning into that plaza, it's going to be problematic.
Well, you know, we can look at it further again and with the driveways.
You mentioned it was low impact in regards to volume of traffic, but if you stated your peak, you're going to have 18 employees on hand. So, I mean, what is your turn per hour for customers that if you need 18 employees on hand?
We would estimate anywhere between, 40 and 50 customers in that peak.
Is that per hour?
Per hour, yes. And that occurs typically after 3 o'clock to closing. It takes roughly, depending, anywhere from 8 to 15 minutes to handle a customer during the peak times. So, that's why you need multiple employees, and it's not just counter space. It's they're doing multiple things within the business during the daytime hours. So you may have 10 customer counters open, so you'd be able to handle 10 customers or more at a time at any one time, as opposed to just having going to the pharmacy and you have 2 cashiers. That's not what this how these facilities operate.
As we look back to the 2 businesses that occupied that single building before, that is a significant intensification of the property, and it is a concern.
No, I'm not suggesting it. I'm just a relative volume. I'm just suggesting an overall hourly volume, which is not a high volume.
Who just asked that question, please?
David Flanders.
David, could we have staff address this matter with the applicant, and then if you don't mind, I'll allow you to speak.
Sure.
Sorry, again, I have a limited screen with regards to who's speaking, so.
No, that's fine.
Thank you, David. Jamie, do you have anything on the zoning side right now?
No, I see the additional ADA spaces, just a little concern as the location in that people turning in off Dale Carlia Street, and the location of those spaces in the crosswalk. But additional accessible parking is needed, so the configuration is just a little concerning.
Well, by code, the spaces have to be located closest to the entrance, and they have to be interdispersed. So, if someone were to be pulling in off of Dale Collier and entering our facility, it would be difficult to, and in that northernmost space, but by code, by the ADA definition, we need to locate those spaces to be the spaces closest to the entrance. Not to further reduce parking, what you commonly see is shared utilization of the stripe space in between them, which allowed us to craft in the 6 spaces with only a loss of 3 spaces. So I don't know that there's much leeway to move them around if they're not in compliance with that federal code.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, other than relocating them up against the building, and with it's the locations that are on the proposed plan are as close as you're going to get, like you said, with the way the configuration is. Yes.
Yeah, because that area we've also striped to the south of the 2 units. That's the fire lane. That's where the FDC connections are. So we wouldn't want the most vulnerable people that close to the building in an.
Agreed.
So we got John, Steve.
I've got one other thing as it relates to zoning. The zoning ordinance requires that the loading area be 12 feet in width and 60 feet in length. How that shakes out, I do understand that this business probably utilizes smaller vehicles, but that is a standard that we've held other applications to.
So in order to address that, you may need to request a waiver.
It would be a variance because,
That would be a variance.
correct.
Can it be done in the back, Joe?
Well, I mean, we'll have to provide a loading area, right? That's, for something that large and not be able, maybe not utilize it. Because that dimensional variance combined with the special use permit kicks this up to Newton and out.
Yeah, that would not be allowed in South Kingstown, combination of both.
Exactly. And so, John, we're now proposing something for, you wanted to see that code requires a loading space to be 60 feet.
12 by 60.
Right. And the one for the Ocean State job lot does not suffice. The one at the northernmost part of the building, I can see from our site plan, it looks like there's a WB-40 truck in there.
Dude, what's the size of the, what's the gross leasable floor area of the entire building collectively?
I believe we are approximately, maybe about 50,000, just shy.
So we're working the opposite direction. You need one off-street loading space for every use having a gross leasable floor area of up to 10,000. One additional loading space provided for each additional 20,000 square feet or a fraction thereof.
So we are at 5,000 square feet, so therefore we do not need a loading space.
I thought you just said 50,000.
50,000 for the whole building, but our unit is only 5. Therefore, our unit would not require a loading space.
So that comes out of section 709 of the zoning ordinance. So I will defer to Jamie Gorman to make that determination. I don't know, he needs to make it right at this moment,
Of course not.
but for consistency, I think Jamie should be weighing in on that.
Okay, I can get back to you on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
I guess I'll speak right now. With regards to the development, I think you have a couple opportunities here. Given your proposed peak traffic flow and what you're proposing to do right now and trying to get you in the queue so a determination can be made that you're compliant with the zoning code and our design review standards. One of the aspects are looking at your reconfiguration of Dale Carly Street's entrance and opportunities there of perhaps pushing that entrance a little more east, which would allow you to utilize, we'll say that right now there's an inn that's extremely wide with an island centered on a westerly exit. You're proposing to close what is now the westerly exit and utilize the easterly exit and turn that into an in and out, and reconfigure that. You may have an opportunity to close what is the westerly exit, put parking in front of the facility, and utilize the easterly exit as an in and out. That would allow you potentially to move your ADA parking in front of the building and then reconfigure some of the parking within the parking field, as well as adjust your landscaping. I have a few concerns with the reconfiguration, primarily potential conflicts with the 60-degree angled parking on the street and sight lines. You put one Ford F-250 in that easterly most 60-degree angled space, and you're going to block the sight line of an exiting vehicle. There may be an opportunity working with the town of perhaps making that parallel parking and increasing your ability to have good sight line there. Similarly, the easterly parallel parking on the side street is informal, not striped, and has a sidewalk diving into that southeasterly parked car, which Jay is so kindly pointing out right now, that sidewalk turns the corner off of Kingstown Road and in essence goes into the trunk of that car right now. That is probably a pedestrian movement that needs to be addressed. So I'll just kind of summarize some of the items that we'd like you to take a look at. And that's really looking hard at the sightline configuration for the modified entrance on the side street as it relates to pedestrian movements and parked vehicles within the town right of way. You are proposing to make some facade changes to the southwesterly corner of the building, and we'd like to see some more details about that. Right now, that building has a street presence from an urban design standpoint, and you would be eliminating that presence. So perhaps with a little more architectural treatment, you can retain that appearance there. We'd also like to have a better idea of what your lighting plan is. I know you have a robust security plan internal to the building. So my assumption is along with internal cameras and security, you're going to have external cameras and security, which may affect how your building's going to be lit. So right now, I didn't see anything with regards to wall packs or anything you're proposing on the exterior of the building. And we'd be interested in the fact of whether you're proposing to do anything there. Landscaping, I do applaud you for your initial efforts to provide some street presence and street trees along the easterly edge of the parking lot, but I think you have an opportunity to push that landscaping along Kingstown Road, where there is literally a town sidewalk and then a mass or sea of pavement between there and the buildings. You may want to look at perhaps moving the end cap landscaping to the perimeter of the site, just east of the guardrail structures, and eliminating some of that pavement. It would also help you out with some potentially impervious areas for storm drainage also, and alleviate that one. And again, looking at that, we'll call it the southernmost entrance on Kingstown Road. In your proposal, and I think John touched upon this, the concern would be queuing in Kingstown Road and making that left-hand turning movement where there's no stacking on Kingstown Road and there's literally limited stacking internal to the site, given the configuration of a decision that I have to make immediately entering the site. I have to make a decision to turn right or turn left. And those two turning movements could conflict with an exiting vehicle trying to get back out to Kingstown Road. So you really have almost a five-way intersection there in a very confined space. And that's true for that southern entrance and the northern entrance also. So just like you to take a look at that, understanding that your peak could be 40 to 50 vehicles. That's different than the commercial mix in the center right now. And again, you were looking at restriping a fair amount of that easterly parking area. So you may have some opportunities there. I just don't want you to get too far into the process without looking at that and then having to address it later on.
Jamie, thank you. May I follow up on a couple of the comments? Just
Yes.
so I understand. So on Dale Collier Street, those cars that are stacked there, that's within the town's right of way. We would need council approval to we weren't going to propose any site improvements off the property. That sidewalk that returns into those four cars.
You're proposing the landscape in the town right away?
No, we were not. That if that green overspilled, that exists today. Those islands, if you look at the existing conditions plan, the aerial that we showed right before that, those islands exist.
Based on what I reviewed, you're proposing to expand those. That's not your intent. That's not And I understand that you're working off of one of the
Well,
aspects is
our
that you're
in- our
working off of
intent-
GIS data, not class 1 survey data.
We are, that's correct, but our expansion, our intent was any expansion of those islands would be in our property.
Oh, you're showing them off your property.
Thank you.
The southernmost island at your reconfigured entrance does not exist. It is
That's right.
good practice to do what you're proposing to do, but you would be working within the right of way. I think it's warranted and needed. We'll help you work through the permitting process that would be necessary to accomplish that.
Okay.
Again, from a design standpoint, the right thing to do is to protect your proposed ADA space, as well as protecting that informal parallel parking from the turning movement.
So we can work something up.
I just want to add, since we were touching on, this is Jay Parker. I just want to add, since we were touched on landscaping. This property would be subject to the landscape requirements outlined in the subdivision regulations, which requires building landscaping, interior landscaping, perimeter landscaping, street landscaping. If the intent is not to meet those standards, it will require a waiver from the planning board, and will also require that the development plan review with the planning board be held as a public hearing. And I can, if you want to shoot me an email later, or I can send you an email, Joe, with those specific standards.
We've already engaged, thank you, Jay. We've already engaged Diane Soul. We know the specific requirements. We're not going to meet. I mean, there's maybe close to a dozen of them we won't meet. So that means anytime you repurpose an internal condo building, someone has to come in that site has to come in full compliance with landscape. So if I put my engineering office in there instead of Yankee Travel, I would have to landscape this entire site?
Again, that's a zoning, the language isn't explicitly clear when you read the ordinance. However, a previous interpretation has been with the change of use or improvements to the site, anything that falls under a renovation of an existing use that's subject to development plan review with the planning board, that section applies.
And Joe, in your example, it would be office to office potentially. In here, we're going office to retail or service to retail.
So if this was just an umbrella store, would someone need to landscape this entire site?
Ultimately, a decision for zoning, but we're pointing it out just so that you're aware of it.
Then can we also request, Jamie, I guess we need to answer that question as well as the loading.
So the change of use, it would be, this is marijuana retail facility is the use code, correct?
Yes.
So if change of the use code would trigger that, bringing it full compliance.
You can, that section is section 505.7 B2.
Thank you.
Redevelopment of existing uses subject to development plan review as provided in subsection 505(1) B2.
And relative to the second loading facility or the loading space.
Yeah, so I'm reading 707A, at least one off-street loading space shall be provided and maintained on the same lot, every use having a gross leasable area of up to 10,000 square feet.
Yeah, it does say every use, so
Now, do we have to comply with all of the zoning, all of the loading spaces? Or
I'm
just
not reading.
ours?
I'm reading that, seeing that it being 5,000 square feet and under the 10,000, that use wouldn't have to comply with the additional loading space.
Okay.
As we're proceeding, do we have anything more? Jamie, John, Jay,
No.
Union Fire? Chris,
Yeah, Jamie, I have one thing. The loading area is showing 24 feet. That's directly where the exit door comes out from the back and from the basement. So they're gonna have to take that into consideration. They can't have the full 24 feet of parking with an exit door there. They're infilling where the ability to come out of that building before on the side of the building. So they're
Yes.
infilling that with brick. So the door would lead directly into that loading area. And it's probably a 36-inch door at least, so. you have to
Fair.
take that into consideration.
All right, fair enough.
Can you hear us? Excuse me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, Ed and I can't seem to get the screen up, but we're here.
Hi, this is Ed. I'm sorry. Hi, this is Ed. Just a quick question. Since South Kingstown didn't adopt a blanket ordinance in regards to the enabling legislation to address Newton, and you did it limited, it's just the setbacks. My only question would be now that because we can't meet the requirements of the off-street loading, we're kicking this to a use variance, which means loss of all beneficial use. So I guess my only question is, seeing as that redevelopment of sites that have many pre-existing conditions would be impractical, is that how the town has been handling in the past when you're redeveloping a site, trying to improve conditions that you simply can't meet all of them, that you kick it to a use variance? I'm just trying to get a grasp of that, that's all.
Well, I think it's moot, Ed, because the zoning official just stated no loading spaces required for.
Oh, okay, I'm
our
sorry.
use.
I'm sorry, I thought it was up
Am
to
I
the-
correct in saying that?
Correct.
Okay,
We missed that. We couldn't hear
yeah, I
that.
thought it was saying up to the
Alright.
10,000.
I
Okay,
struggle with technology myself.
I'm sorry, yeah, we're having a bad time here.
Yeah.
And,
real
and
bad.
secondly, as we are trying to work through this, as Joe has stated, and Diane's been working on it, and we're trying to improve the site as feasibly as possible to meet all your requirements. I've done other projects in South Kingston, so I know what the desires of the town are to capture these sites through the DPR process and improve on old conditions when, let's face it, the Wild West cared little for these types of things, and I can appreciate that. But so a lot of these can be treated as waivers through the planning board process, which is a good thing. And as Jamie, as you mentioned, we also are dealing with the condo association, so we're trying our best to improve the sites. But so hopefully we can treat a lot of these as waivers as we try to improve on these conditions. So
Ed, our goal ultimately is you're doing enough to warrant the waiver.
understood.
And it's probably just a second set of eyes or a meeting between your design team and our department and engineering as well as zoning to determine, what's best regulatory on this site to get you through the process. We're not here as a roadblock.
Amy, the town engineer is not here today. Will he forward additional comments or can we expect any?
Rich did jump on board for a little bit. He's muted, but Rich, you have
Yeah,
anything?
no, so I jumped on, but yeah, if I have any additional things, I'll forward comments. Were you thinking about, can you hear me, Joe?
Yes, I can.
Yes. Were you thinking about doing any sort of retro water quality treatment or anything like that here?
So, we looked at the soils and it's only urban. I don't know that we have many opportunities, but maybe in those landscape areas, we can try to capture a first flush and see if we can infiltrate some of the water before it hits the state highway. The contours tell me everything is moving in a northerly direction, left to right on the screen. And that's just where those landscape areas are. So I don't know that we can catch the water quality volume in such a small area, but we can try to do the maximum extent practicable.
Yeah, I mean, actually, that would be perfect if you could do, again, just like you said, maximum extent practicable. That helps us. We've slated some of these sites as being places to help out on Indian Run and the tributaries, and so it'd be just good to get something as much as you can do. We understand that we're not asking for any stormwater treatment beyond again, water quality, but what's practicable. So thank you.
Yep, I think we have opportunity to do that.
Are you planning any outdoor storage or refuge?
No, we are not. I don't think the DBR allows any of the outdoor storage and refuse. That would all be secure within the building.
Okay, I just wanted to point out that would have to be shown on the landscape plan, and it would have to be fenced.
Yeah, there is some outdoor storage and refuse for other tenants. We were going to leave that as is.
I have one. Sorry, Jake. I have one question, and it's merely just a question. I saw in your slides, Joe, that you had has a substantial packaging area. And does DBR allow for packaging? I was under the impression that the product would come prepackaged and it would only be necessarily sold there and not packaged. Am I incorrect in that?
I don't know enough to speak on that. I believe that when we say fulfillment, we're not packaging or making anything on site. It's just the normal breaking down and then putting it on the shelf. But we do have Diane or Christine. Can you speak to any of that in our fulfillment area? What specifically will be happening?
Joe, I think we lost them.
All right.
It's not necessarily imperative at this time. I seem to recall that the goods that would be sold are prepackaged. So, I mean, I guess it comes down to a determination of what is packaged. Do you receive in bulk and then break them down into smaller packages if that's?
Yeah, I will follow up with that. Patrick Casey's on the line. I don't know if he can hear me, if he wanted to jump in on the operations. Here we go.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you,
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
I was trying to figure out how to work this thing, sorry.
It's fun, isn't it?
Speaking to my computer with nobody hearing. Yeah, it's not packaging insofar as there's raw material going into packaging. It's just that when it comes from the cultivators and all that, it will be in larger packages that contain the individual packages to be sold. And then you just have to break that larger package open and put it in a fulfillment center that is used to replenish whatever's sold out in front. So what you want to do is you don't want to have a lot of product out in front. You want to have enough to service a couple of customers. You want to have the majority of the product in secure rooms and back.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Anything additional from TRC members? If not, I'd like to see if Mr. Flanders has anything up.
Amy, would it be prudent to have a letter from the condo association saying that they're okay with these improvements that we made?
That would not be a bad suggestion. I'll have council weigh on that. Amy, council just
Only
requested.
because if we granted them their development plan review and then the association said they don't want this work done, could be an issue.
Yeah, that'd be on the association though, not us, Steve. So, Christine?
Yes, we will most definitely look into the other condo unit owners. Of course, we have the consent of the owner here, and he signed off on the application, but we'll have to pursue these questions with the other unit owners and let you know as soon as we can.
The buildings are condoed in the units and the parking lots in an HOA?
I'm not
Or
100%.
Common management agreement or such?
I
I
believe
believe the building's a condo, and then there's one that is sublet as well. But we'll have to look into that HOA.
Okay. Mr. Flanders?
Yeah, I only wanted to add one other point about traffic density, and that being that when schools get up to running at full capacity, both the high school, University of Rhode Island, that their peak traffic is going to coincide almost identically with the peak traffic expected with the Compassion Center, right between 3 and 3:30 in the afternoon. So what we see now without, full school load, and what we see at a different time of day is going to be quite different what we see during Monday through Friday in the afternoon.
My answer, this is Paul Bannon. We didn't say the peak was at 3 to 3:30. We said the peak occurs after 3, typically till closing.
Sure.
The high school is also going to be relocating. So, traffic is going to be different in this area around the school morning and afternoon peaks.
But it's a fair comment. What we see today is not hopefully what we see in the future when we get back to normal.
I will again attempt to summarize the concerns in order to move this along. We had both, the TRC had concerns with regard to parking, both internal and external, circulation as it relates to pedestrian and vehicular, both internal and external, primarily associated with access from Kingston Road and Dale Carley, landscaping modifications, any lighting modifications, storm drainage with regards to first flush, and then the consent of the legal vehicle of the center outside of the condo association for the building, but site specific for renovations to the parking fields and entrances. Did I miss anything?
Just the exit door and the loading area conflict.
We can add that, but I think that perhaps was resolved.
Fair enough.
And again, Jamie can address that as we move forward a little further also. Does the group think I missed anything? I would recommend moving this on with those concerns.
So moved.
Steve? I hear a second.
Just a procedural question. So we're approving what? What stage are we approving with, I guess, further clarifications? I always struggle with moving projects forward when there's a lot of data that we still need to get back.
Jay, do you want to weigh in on where we are? And we're still almost a month and 6 weeks from the next meeting.
Sure. So first off, I just want to clarify that we have not completed the review for completeness on this project yet. Obviously, that completeness will dictate when it's ready for a planning board agenda. There are, I'm sure the applicant's aware, there's a development plan review checklist with a number of required items that are required. So we will be taking a look at that in the next, probably by the end of the week, and have a response out to the applicant as to how the application stands. This is a development plan review application that requires an advisory to the zoning board from the planning board. The items that were talked about, we've clarified, or we've come to an understanding that there are going to be waivers requested. Those waivers need to be articulated in a letter signed by the applicant or the applicant's representative, attesting to those items in the subdivision regulations that are not going to be met. This recommendation gets put forward to the planning board. We provide the recommendation to the applicant to be prepared to address some of these items potentially prior to getting to the planning board and having the discussion with the board.
So I guess I'm still struggling. Are we recommending or are we just memorializing the open items? If we're memorializing open items, I have no qualm with that. If we're recommending, that's where I struggle with. What are we recommending?
Well, if it's not deemed complete yet, then we just be pointing out the issues at hand then.
Ms. Mack is in the audience and she's raised her hand and wants to provide some information. Should I allow her to talk, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Maria, I think you're unmuted.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Good afternoon, Maria.
Hi, thanks for giving me the opportunity to comment. Just kind of procedurally, given the amount of issues and complications with this site, as duly noted by the TRC, generally when something of this nature comes before the TRC and is not complete, has so many concerns, we generally advise that it come back to the TRC before proceeding to the planning board. So just a thought from many years of observation.
Just for clear, I asked for a motion, but I didn't ask for anyone to weigh in on a favorable vote.
Right, I just meant that it should come back. I think it should come back to the TRC for further discussion. It's a complicated site.
What is the pleasure of the members? I think John's brought up a valid point, as well as Maria. Mr. Damasi, as a member of the commission, would you feel more comfortable with a motion to table and have them back before us? I think it's the week of November 9th.
Yes, based on like John Schock mentioned, that you can't move this forward, all these issues that are open. That should be answered. And Jay said he hasn't certified it as complete. If it's not complete, it can't be moved forward to the board.
Right. So again, we have that.
So we have the bullet points that you mentioned should be noted to the applicant that they have to be addressed and brought back to the TRC.
And Jay, we would still have the opportunity to have them on the agenda on the 24th if everything was addressed.
Potentially, yes. We I just want to clarify, though, that the way the TRC system has worked in the past was that they didn't necessarily need to be complete to get an advisory from the TRC. There's been many applications that have come to the TRC,
5051B,
received an advisory, and then became complete afterwards. So I think the issues at hand are certainly reasonable, but I think that one component of it is not necessarily something that should drive whether or not.
What I'm hearing from the members is that they would feel more comfortable having it returned to them before they made that recommendation. Is that a good summation?
Can I ask a question, Mr. Rabbit?
Yeah, go ahead, Christine.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I'm looking at the section 505 under the ordinance for performance standards, development plan review. And I'm looking at the section redevelopment of existing uses, which is under B2. And it states that to change the existing use within a building or upon a lot from one use code category to another use code category, this provision shall not apply to changes of use code category when the change of use occurs within a shopping center. So I'm just curious as to what your interpretation is of that with respect to this site. It seems as though we would fall under that shopping center category in terms of the description.
Can you give us that reference again?
Yes, it is 505B. It's 505.
It's 505.1.
Oh, okay.
1B.
B,
Yeah.
yeah, 2,
Yep, under the C exempt, subsection C under
3, 3C.
C exempt activities, and then C under 3C. I'm sorry,
Yeah, they are correct. And
Yep.
the definition of shopping center is a group of 3 or more stores or other commercial establishments in one or more buildings planned, developed, and managed as a single facility on one lot with off-street parking provided on that lot. So that would fall, this would be a shopping center.
Yep.
And according to this section, the provisions would not apply.
This is Jay. I've read that before. I've read that previously, I should say. And I think it's further complicated by the fact that the special use permit requires an advisory from the planning board as part of the development plan review with the board.
But I think the question that I have is the performance standards themselves, even though we know we're before you for the development plan review, unquestionably, it's just these performance standards. It seems to be making an exemption for these shopping centers when there's a change of use within one of the stores, one of the available space, I should say. Ed, did you want to say?
yeah,
something?
we're not trying to use this to skirt the regulations. We understand that we're trying to improve on old conditions. We understand that. That's what the whole point of this is for DPR anyway, in any community. We're just looking at the degree of inability to meet these requirements. And I can also understand why then this language would exist, because you're going to have some situations where you're doing your best, but you're meeting a 5 or 10% improvement, and people saying, "Wow, you still have a 90% deficiency." I'm just throwing out theoretical numbers, and I think that's why this language exists too. Is because you got to provide some protection to pre-existing non-conforming situations. So I'm just saying that we're trying our best, but the degrees of waivers and the number of waivers are going to seem so outlandish that maybe this affords us some protection, so we can show that we're making improvements. And we're actually going above and beyond the call that what even the ordinance calls for. And that's really what we're trying to argue here.
Right, but again, this is Jay. That determination on the waiver acceptability is made by the planning board. So all of that justification would be for the planning board to make.
Even if we are deemed a part of a shopping center?
Again, I think it's a play on words. It's not a perfect, the language of the ordinance doesn't bode well to that type of making an effective determination on what constitutes development plan review in this situation. You can't get the advisory from the planning board without going through development plan review. I guess you could argue it both ways, but I think in my eyes, the request for waivers, outlining the waivers, if the TRC said, "Hey, we want to see X, Y, and Z," and the applicant says, "No, we can't provide that, or we're not willing to provide that," that's a waiver request for the planning board then to determine if it's appropriate or not.
I guess I'm just confused. I say this with all due respect, I truly do. And I understand that we most definitely have to be within the purview of the development plan review processes, but I'm just confused with respect to the performance standards themselves. and the applicability when they have that specific language in the code for the exemption of the change of use within the shopping centers.
Because you'd be treating a new development in the same vein as you're treating a pre-existing situation where you couldn't possibly meet, right? So if this was either a piece of property that had never been improved, or a property where we're coming in, we say, we understand, and we're gonna revamp the whole property. We're tearing everything down, we're cleaning everything up so we can bring it into the standards. That's one situation. But you're treating the two scenarios in the same vein. So clearly this language provides some understanding that there's those situations where you couldn't possibly come and meet the standards, even though you're trying to make some improvements. I really think that's why that language exists. But if you're being treated in the same vein, it shouldn't be applicable in the same situation. They're two completely different scenarios.
Well, Mr. Pimentel, you are changing, the use of the unit is changing. So I think it would be premature to say that any change of use to anything in there would not require improvements, because it's not a demo and rebuild of the whole site. Obviously, different uses will have different considerations regarding safety, access, and circulation. That's what this process is for.
I understand, but that's what the language says. It says to change the existing use within a building or upon a lot from one use code to another. This provision shall not apply when you're talking about a shopping center, which we meet the definition. And all we're doing is changing the physical use within one of the tenancies. That's all we're doing. And by the way, we're not arguing to you saying we're going in and we're exempt and bye-bye. That's not what we're asking for.
It's still part of the development plan review process.
Right, because this falls under DPR. What we're saying is this is giving us some latitude to say we're making accommodations and improvements the best we can, but to apply them, carte blanche like you would a new development is just not appropriate given this protective language.
Yeah, Ed, again, Jamie Rabbit, I think initially I stated that we understand it's the redevelopment and a new use within an existing shopping center. We're looking for your best effort to, in your modifications to the site, comply with the intent of the code, understanding that we're not looking for complete compliance as if you were building this center from scratch. And I think you've made a first flush effort at compliance, and it's looking at perhaps some reorganization of your effort so that staff can fully support any waiver request or latitude you need within the existing code. I will look closer at that section you're referring to. Please understand there are our regulations were last updated in 2012. There is this reference, and we are aware potentially of other cross-references that in some manner offer a different conclusion based on which sections you're reading and in what order. So we will look at that. I think the intent of the TRC is, based on the discussion I'm hearing, is to continue this discussion, afford you the opportunity to address some of the issues that came up today and revisit it at our next regularly scheduled meeting. I think it's initially scheduled for Veterans Day. I think we have an adjustment to that date, Jay. But again, and work with you in the preceding days with regards to resolving some of the issues that were pointed out today. I don't think we can bring complete clarity, Mr. Pimentel, this evening to your question.
Jamie, this is.
I understand the words you're saying, but I don't want to do those in isolation of the remaining 700 or so pages of our regulations.
Hey, Jamie, you can call me Ed.
Jamie, this is Steve. There's the fact that they're condominium units and they're individual entities come into play versus a shopping center.
Again, it may be a legal issue or you're cutting here, Steve, but typically most developments, whether they're the Rhode Island Mall, Midland Mall, or a power center, typically there may be a few out parcels, but the rest are held in common ownership and then condoed out with an overall maintenance agreement. So again, we'll look closely at the regulations, make sure we got you in the right queue. And again, the understanding and the way the regs are written, and that's why we have those waiver provisions, is to offer a way out in the redevelopment of a parcel or the development of a new parcel when strict adherence to the intent is impossible. So again, you can't design the center to the modern code and then meet the parking requirements. Something would have to give. You'd either be underparked or.
No, I understand that. I do. I just, my issue is the timing with, if we're not required to meet those performance standards, but of course we'll make our very best effort, as Mr. Pimentel stated. The issue is the need to request the waivers. That puts it into a different category altogether, because then we would have to go, as you noted, before the planning board. And because of the timeline, you know, that's my concern. If we're not legally obligated to do so, I just want to make sure that we're not being asked to do so.
We'll look at that legal matter.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
If that's the board's, if the board's in agreement.
This is Jay. The best case scenario with what's been discussed thus far would be a submission of waivers that are going to be requested. Obviously getting to completeness with the application itself, returning to the TRC in November and doing the advertisements for the public hearing for the planning board on November 24th prior to the TRC meeting in November. So there would have to be some acknowledgement that we would have to advertise for the public hearing before we have the TRC meeting, and everyone would have to be comfortable with that.
Mr. Parker, when is the zoning board scheduled in December?
I'm not aware of that. Jamie, do you know?
So the hearing date is December 16th, and then November 13th is the deadline to file.
November 13th is the deadline, and what's the date again? I'm so sorry.
December 16th is the hearing.
Thank you.
Yes.
I mean, that's being optimistic. I mean, as a
I
planning
understand.
board as a planning board member, the issues that are at hand here, if they're not resolved before that first meeting, you're not going to get an approval that night. I know the feelings of most of the board members, and there's going to be a lot of concerns. We've had a lot of these parcels come in for this use, and so we know what we're looking at and what we expect. And again, if there's a lot of open issues, you're not going to get a hearing one night and get a decision that night. You're going to be continued until you can provide all that information. So all the information that you get cleared through the TRC first, you know, there's a greater chance that you'll make it through in one meeting. But again, to think you're going to make a December meeting of a zoning board is very optimistic at this point.
Okay. With the input of the board, would someone entertain a motion to continue this agenda item to your regularly scheduled meeting in November?
So move.
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
Just that you make those bullet points that we talked previously about, Jamie, that you mentioned.
Yes, I'll
Yeah, that the
put
applicant.
those in writing and get them to the applicant. Any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Raise your hands. Any nays? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you all. See you on the 9th.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
Moving on to the next. We have agenda item D2, Major Land Development Project Conceptual Master Plan. The residents on Holly request to construct 12 two-bedroom dwelling units within 6 structures on the subject parcel AP 57-1, lot 110, located on Holly Street. Scott Halberg, applicant, Southern Rhode Island Professional Center, LLC owner. Do you have anyone from representing Mr. Halberg?
Thank you. Once again, I'm John Kenyon, attorney for the applicant, Scott Hallberg. This property is located on Holly Street. It's designated as Tax Assessors Plat 57-1, Lot 110. The lot is 1.3 acres in size. It's in a commercial neighborhood zoning district. The applicant's proposing 6 buildings, each containing 2 residential dwelling units. 2 of the units would be designated as low to moderate income. We were before the board on a pre-application earlier in the year, and there were several concerns that were raised that have been incorporated into the new master plan. The board at that time requested that we reduce the curb cuts, which at the time were 4, and they also wanted us to revise the plan so the garages weren't facing the street. There was a suggestion that they provide a access road to the rear of the houses. And we looked into that, and our concern with that was the impact on the residential uses to the rear of this property. If we put the intensity back there, it might have some adverse impacts on them. So instead, what the applicant did was he redesigned it, turned the middle building so they were facing each other and could share a driveway, and then also the garages would be facing to the side rather than the street. The applicant, I believe, is with us today, along with the project engineer, Josh Rosen. And if we could just have Josh go over the existing and proposed conditions, please.
Mr. Kenyon, before Mr. Rosen begins, I'm looking for Mr. Hallberg in the attendees list. Is he called in? Is he on his phone?
I believe he's sitting next to Mr. Rosen.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Jay, he's in my office with me.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Okay, so Josh Rosen, for the record, registered professional engineer, Principal Engineering Office at 27 Secundit Ridge Drive in Tiverton. Mr. Kenyon did a nice summary of the project. We obviously went forward to start this at pre-application. And I'll just give a couple additional highlights on some of the technical matters that we're going to continue to design going forward at hopefully preliminary. But the project is a 12-unit residential development project. 12 units are spread among the 6 buildings on site. We, from the start at pre-application, had that southerly set of buildings, 3 buildings with 6 units facing each other with a common curb cut. We did take the 2 interior buildings and turn them and face each other to reduce that 4th curb cut, as Mr. Kenyon mentioned. So the 2 buildings in the middle are facing each other. And then the northerly building on site, the last 2 units, that has its own curb cut off of Holly Street. So in total, we've got 3 curb cuts. Each of the units right now, the way they're laid out, are intended to have their own garage space, a single unit garage space. And then there's obviously the on-site parking that's shown dedicated in the driveway space and the ancillary space for the units as well. We've basically provided 2 parking spaces per every dwelling unit between the on-site parking and the garage spaces. Since pre-application, we've also sent this plan to Suez Water. Mr. Dowdell at Suez Water prepared a letter of approval for connection to his water service based on what you folks see on the screen. That letter was sent in our package. We sent a plan and a request for availability to public services relative to the sewer. And that a copy of that letter that we received back was also sent as part of our master plan. It indicates that sewer is available. Obviously, what's laid out here needs to be reviewed and discussed with the Department of Public Services, particular to the sewer. But this is our best case layout at this point, and we'll obviously continue to design as we move forward. One of the other items that was discussed at pre-application was the sidewalks on Holly Street. Right now, the sidewalk system on the westerly side of the road, same side as this project, ends just after the medical building on the property to the south, just after the northerly access driveway. So as a part of this proposal, the applicant is going to extend that sidewalk system to the north. And we picked a central location along this property's frontage where we could provide for a crosswalk across Holly Street and provide access to the commercial properties to the east, as well as pick up the sidewalk system that is running from south to north in that section on the easterly side of Holly Street. We provided a walking path for the northerly residents on this development parcel that would allow them to also access that same sidewalk system in Holly Street. Landscaping buffer would be provided at the rear of this property, adjacent to the residential uses. We've elected the 20-foot partial landscape screen. We'll develop a final landscape plan with the particular species of that vegetation and how that's going to be set up, as well as the area landscape around the buildings as we move forward. Our driveway designs in this case are going to be utilizing a permeable or porous asphalt to reduce the impacts of the surface runoff. We're going to select areas on site to mitigate the roof runoff via bioretention areas for stormwater management. So at this point, that is a pretty good summary of the elements of the technical design features within the parcel and adjacent to. If anybody has any questions, we can further discuss those items at this point.
This is Steve. Josh, I believe it was Susan Axelrod that had mentioned the issue about the garage doors facing Holly Street. That northernmost building, can that not be configured to move those doors away from facing Holly?
Yeah, the only possibility we would have would be to change the unit style and make some kind of side load entry. And we looked into that. We could only really accommodate a side load entry for one of the units without compromising the space between the buildings, if that makes sense. It's possible that we might be able to have the architect review that one building in specific, and maybe there could be another way to do it. But and again, to match the harmony with the other buildings, same style and layout, it was just not feasible. But we could always give it one more shot.
The fact that that'll probably be brought up. So
Understood.
If there's a reason you can't do it and it's justifiable, that's fine.
Yeah, we'll give it one more pass through with the architect when we start to flesh out the details of the units a little bit more. And we'll see if we can accommodate that.
Gosh, you didn't mention architecture. Have you shared that? We haven't seen any of that in the application materials yet.
No, we haven't received or had the architect prepare specific plans at this point.
So if he hasn't prepared specific plans, do we know? So you did the layout?
Yeah, we
follow along.
Yeah, we did. We asked, we talked at a discussion about typical footprints, size of units based on the layout that we have, the fact that we have these, 2-unit buildings, and, you gave some general configurations like the units you see here, but just the outside space and the walls. And we've had just some conversations at this point.
Thank you. John or Rich?
Yeah, I got some comments. So with sewers, we'll need a manhole at the property line. And I did also talk to Suez. Has it been thought about having a water main? Because otherwise you've got 12 or 13 separate utility cuts on the road.
Yeah, I had a conversation with Mark, and we asked him to review the project plans and come back with his ideal layout. And this was his ideal layout with the separate services. So I can't really speak for him as far as if a main would be preferable in some way, shape, or form. But I mean, obviously, we know if we're cutting into the road for the utilities on this half of the street, we're gonna be responsible for that restoration on that half of the road.
Well, actually now, we amended the ordinance, it's the full width of the road. So you
Okay.
have the full width for the length of the project. If you have that
Okay.
many utility cuts.
I mean, I don't think the applicant or myself have any issues going back to Suez to look for an alternative. Like I said, this was the ideal layout to start with, so
Okay.
can certainly look into that. I think we're understanding the comment about the sewer. Tried to locate a common manhole just outside of the tie-in spot, and we're considering that, like you said, John, everything would feed that manhole at the private property line, and then, you know, connect once to the sewer. I think we're okay with that. So we'll look at another alternative on the water side of things, and if it makes the connections easier, it'll be beneficial to both sides, for sure.
And we wouldn't want to, I don't think the crosswalk would meet the warrants, nor would we want a mid-block crosswalk. You know, the proposed sidewalks are fine, but we wouldn't want a crosswalk there.
Okay, we'll eliminate the crosswalk.
Are you planning to go DEM?
This property is pretty much at an acre or just above with disturbance, so we would likely have to get stormwater construction and RIPD's permit.
All right, I will ask that you address the 100-year on volume as well. I'm a little concerned about the properties along Oak Street. And having this property discharge entirely to the back of the property, I wouldn't want any extra volume over to the abutters. You know, we can stick with 100-year just because, you know, that's what you're gonna do on peak flow anyways, so.
Fair enough.
Josh, this is Chris. I'm looking at the plans. The closest fire hydrant is next to the fire station or at the corner of Main Street and Holly Street.
Okay.
You propose another, at least one hydrant in there.
But is it on the same side of the road? What's
Yeah,
the water?
it's on the west side.
On our side.
Yeah, we could do that. Which end of the property would you prefer? Is there a preference?
They have to be within 600 feet of the properties. The fire hydrant does. So it's going to depend on where you put it on there. The fire hydrant has to be within 600 feet of the closest point of the building.
Oh, yeah. So the frontage is only 395 feet, I think. So we could put it anywhere along this property's frontage and meet that.
Yeah, that's fine. Wherever you propose it, sure. As long as you can meet the 600 feet to the property
Okay.
line.
Okay.
A building, I'm sorry.
Josh, with regards, I think you've touched a little bit upon them, finalizing landscaping. As you do that, along with the buffer, your foundation plantings, look potentially at the introduction of a street tree canopy along the frontage. That establishment of an aerial hedge would do quite a bit to buffer that residential. More, it's value to the community, but it's value to the units as an aerial hedge to the commercial across the street and the fact that you're looking at their back of house. I think you've addressed a little bit of the circulation with regards to the pedestrian movement. I would be a proponent of bringing that sidewalk across and then having it on the street side of the northern units versus inviting the public to the rear of someone's, property or yard. Again, that's a design determination you can make. Pedestrian movement, that addresses that. Vehicular movements, again, concerned a little bit about the proposed parking on those northern units, which is northernmost unit, which is going to require that car to back onto the street and make sure you have adequate sight line to address that turning movement. Rich and John addressed drainage. You addressed the fact that you believe you'll need to go to DEM for the review, given the acre plus size of disturbance. And the only other aspect associated with this would be clarifying what waivers you'll need, given some of the setbacks you're proposing, as opposed to what our regulations say. And Jay, do you have anything to add?
No, yes, I do.
You said no first.
I know. I didn't want to, I don't know, I was mistaken. As I had spoken with Scott a couple months ago, this project would be considered a multi-household land development project. As such, there's a number of standards in the subdivision regulations that apply, including walkways, parking lots, distance between buildings on the lot, open space requirements such as that. I know Mr. Rosen indicated in his narrative that no waivers were being requested at this time, but those standards will need to be addressed. And if there are any waivers that are going to be required, they'll need to be provided in a letter format signed by the applicant.
And it's John Kenyon. Jay, just for clarification on that, I disagree that this is a multi-household land development project. I don't believe that those standards apply to this type of development, since we're talking a maximum of 2 units. So we'll have to probably discuss that with the town solicitor and get a reading on that.
Understood. Okay.
If Maria and or David are still on board.
Yep.
David, do you have anything to add?
No, just my naivete. I wonder, it looks to me like these are multi-households. John, why would that you not consider this a multi-household development? It's a matter of definitions that I don't know.
Right. I don't have it right in front of me, Dave, but my understanding of multi-household is that it's more than 2 units, that you have a single family, you have duplex, and then you have multi-household.
Okay.
And I believe their argument is that we have more than 2, we have 2 or more duplexes on one lot, which makes it multi-household. And my reading of it is that you have to have units of 2 or more units that are more than
Per building.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
And just to balance that side of the argument, there's 2 definitions in multi-household. A multi-household structure, which permits 1 structure on a lot that contains up to 12 units. And then there's multi-household land development project, which is more than 1 structure.
Right.
So I'm alluding, otherwise I can't really find a home for it. Use.
Yep.
Pun intended.
Maria? Is Maria still with us, Jay?
Hello? Hi, sorry, I missed that question.
Maria, do you have anything to add?
Not at this point. I think you should continue to try to get some of the architectural plans so that we could have a look at them, because I think that would help us as we move through the process.
I agree with you. So Jay, timing wise, our conceptual master,
Moving on to the planning board, will require a public informational meeting.
right?
This advertising and notice requirements.
We still have to deem the next step complete, correct?
And have to perform the completeness on it, which I'm hoping to do by the end of this week for all the TRC applications that were reviewed today.
Okay. I guess I'll ask the applicant, time-wise, are you looking to be on the November agenda?
Hi, Scott Hallberg here. Yes, I am.
Okay, Scott.
October.
October. Do you have final engineering done with Mr.
Yeah,
Rosen?
everything's set, yep.
Josh, you can do that in the next week?
Oh, we're only at master plan, so. No, I couldn't in a week.
I know, okay. Members of the commission, or Steve, I would entertain a motion.
So Jay, you said you're gonna be able to rule this complete by the end of the week?
That's my goal.
Okay, well, if it's complete, then I'll make a motion to pass it on to the planning board.
Steve, is that motion subject to
The points that were
completeness
raised.
by the
Yeah.
planning department?
Yep. Be the water issue, the location of the fire hydrant. No crosswalk.
So again, I struggle with, the plan's still in flux to move it forward. What are we're moving it, or Steve's motion is to move it to the planning board for,
Yeah, so John, what we're really doing at this phase is the conceptual master plan intent is the density, is the 12 unit density that fits on the site. Then they would move it to the planning board for, we'll say design. Okay, this is a schematic at best that shows that they can support the density of 12 units in 6 different buildings with associated infrastructure.
but do we know that yet without the detailed drainage? I mean, I don't know how much, I just look at what footprint eats up, and that would be, my thought is, and Rich, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, if that's a large area, does that mean they can't get the density that they're looking for?
I mean, it could. The other issue, I don't know if it's been surveyed. It's been surveyed. I'm not.
Rich, from an administrative standpoint, we have a first. Steve, would you be comfortable withdrawing your motion for a moment?
Yep.
Okay. Please note that Steve DeMasi withdrew his motion. Okay. And again, as we get into, I understand what everyone's saying, and Jay can weigh on this. Sometimes the administrative process that's laid out by the town is kind of a check the box scenario. So we're all used to having greater detail in making decisions with regards to conceptual master plan and density. But our regulations, a lot of things we're looking for are in the next step. And Jay, if you want to expand upon that, feel free.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Rosen has put together a plan, and the applicant is offering that the design works. So we are looking at this from a conceptual standpoint, not necessarily with confirmation that the proposed drainage areas are going to check out, that the houses are, the building footprints are going to be what they are, because they haven't gotten to that level of detail yet. That comes at the preliminary stage. Right now, we're looking to see if the components, if we've accounted for the components on the lot that make it feasible at a high level to do the project, and then vet the specifics and technical issues components later at the preliminary stage.
I think Amy Goins went over this, maybe our last regular meeting. I can't remember the project at hand, but we were getting in, as she called, the weeds. We were getting down too fine of a detail for the master plan review.
Steve, I believe that was one of my projects, and I believe what Amy advised the board, the same question came up that John just asked. And if the drainage is such, if we get vested master plan density and then the property cannot handle it from a drainage standpoint, then it would have to reduce the number of units. It doesn't mean that you're vested and you can build those units no matter what. You still have to comply with all the requirements.
Yeah. Yes, that's my understanding.
Again, the engineering side of the planner in me, I agree with Rich and John that, you know, it's tough making these conceptual master plans decision when we're inclined to ask for additional information, but we have that regulatory process that Steve's alluding to and Mr. Kenyon is alluding to. So, John, I tend to agree with you, but we have a regulatory process that guides us in a slightly different direction.
Understood.
Before we move on to further discussion, I want to just back up a little bit. John, you made a comment that you did not want to see a crosswalk mid-block.
Correct.
Is there a more preferred location where you'd want to see a crosswalk? I
Well,
only ask because at the last time this came up with the board, the planning board was appreciative of the fact of tying into an existing sidewalk on the other side of the street in lieu of construction of a new sidewalk on the west side.
Correct. But again, there are warrants for crosswalks. And I don't know if I don't believe that a crosswalk in that location would meet the warrants that would support one. So my concern with crosswalks is that you're implying that it's a safe means of crossing the road rather than leaving it up to the pedestrian to use his or her judgment to cross the road. So if we don't, whether it's stop signs or crosswalks, if we don't meet warrants, we don't put them in.
Okay.
So perhaps the applicant is, for the next round, their engineer can look at do a warrant analysis based upon what the anticipated population of that project's going to be to try to determine if a crosswalk is in order or not. I don't believe it's going to meet the warrants.
And generally, mid-block crossings aren't desirable. I mean, you want to have them at intersections, stop signs, things like that. It's just not very common. There is one on Main Street, and I'm surprised that it's even there. It's in a real odd spot, but it is at the corner of one of the streets there. But so just generally speaking, they're not always desirable mid-block.
Yeah, that may reopen the discussion of that internal versus external sidewalk on those northern 3 buildings. Again, that can be vetted in further design. But I would agree with Rich and John about mid-block crosswalks. And I'm glad, John, that you are using the warrant system for crosswalks. So with any additional discussion, or Mr. Damasi, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, I'll reiterate my previous motion. If Jay has ruled this complete, that we move it on to the planning board for review, master plan review.
I have a motion. Do I hear a second? I hear silence. I will second it so that we can bring it to a vote. My seconding of the motion does not elicit any yay or nay. So I'll do
Yeah, any discussion?
any discussion? I'll do a roll. Just bear with me. I'm going to start with Jamie.
Aye.
We'll go to Rich.
Aye, aye.
We will go to John.
Aye.
We will go to Steve.
Aye.
And we will go to Mr. Rabbit. And I will say aye also. So motion passes. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
That brings us to our final agenda item. Item D, TRC Advisory Review. 3, Major Land Development Project, Conceptual Master Plan, Wakefield Place Cottages, request to construct 7 single-family residential structures and renovate an existing single-family residential structure and develop the remainder of the site with a private road/driveway, open space, parking, and landscaping. AP 57-1, Lot 195, located at 93 Columbia Street. Scott Hallberg, owner applicant. I believe Scott was just on. And do we have anyone else?
Yes, once again, I'm John Kenyon, attorney for the applicant, Scott Hallberg. This is easy for Jay because it's the same team. Scott's here along with Josh Rosen, the project engineer. Scott owns the property at 93 Columbia Street. It's in an R10 zoning district and it's just over an acre in size. There's an existing single-family residence on the property, which is serviced by public water and sewer. We're here today on the master plan application for a total of 10 residential dwelling units. They're proposing 7 new buildings, with 2 of them being 2-family and each unit containing 2 bedrooms. It's proposed as a cottage zoning development, which is often used in these areas for infill and where there's public utilities available. Under the cottage zoning principles, smaller lots would be created in exchange for smaller footprints and living area. The houses would be limited to a maximum height, I believe, of 18 to 25 feet and a total living area of between 1,200 and 1,240 square feet. 2 out of the 10 dwelling units would be designated as low to moderate income, which complies with the 20% required for inclusionary zoning. This was heard before the planning board on a pre-application back in April. At that time, it was a comprehensive permit. And we incorporated their suggestions into the new design. So at this time, I'd have Josh go over what's being proposed and then what changes we made in response to the planning board's concerns.
Mr. Kenyon,
Yes,
and just for clarification, is this no longer a comp permit?
my understanding is that this, as it is now, meets the zoning requirements.
We don't have cottage regulations yet.
True, but I believe it meets the, no, I'm sorry, I'm thinking of another project. It would still go under as a comprehensive permit.
Thank you, because the application does not indicate that it's a comprehensive permit. So I was going to ask for clarification anyway. And when you indicated it was no longer a comp permit, I was wondering what had changed.
Yep. Josh, are you there?
Yes, I am. I actually maybe misunderstood that part. I thought that when we decided to make the revision where originally the site plan showed individual lots, we went to a land development situation that because our elements of the density and the rest of the design would meet the requirements, that we would no longer need that comprehensive permit. Is that not true?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, these are all on one lot, correct?
Correct. Sure. Yeah.
Hi, Jay. Scott Hallberg, applicant. So we met, I believe it was you several months ago. We met in the office, and in your office, and we talked about a village zoning, cottage zoning. And we went and looked it up and hired the architect, knowing that this cottage zoning was in the works. And this is designed to meet everything that was outlined in the proposed cottage zoning.
Okay, so that cottage zoning ordinance has not been adopted, is not in place.
Right. I think, Jay, some of the conversation that was had when the plan was originally presented wasn't necessarily that we have the ordinance in place, but if we could propose a development to try to mimic what was intended in that zoning or what may come forward in that zoning, we could compare our development with those proposed regulations, then the board would have a pretty good feel about how this application would sort of fit in the neighborhood and have some continuity with the things around it and meet those projected standards. So that's, I think, what we're trying to say is we understand that that's not an ordinance that's in place now, but we tried to have the architect get as close to some of those principles in this design as we could. And I believe that's one of the things that the board members had, asked us to look into going forward.
Understood. I do recall that conversation. I was still under the premise, though, that it was going forward as a comp permit while providing the justification that, hey, this is going to match the cottage zoning that's currently under development.
Okay. I guess John, if you're John Kenyon, if that's the way you understand it, that's fine with me. We'll just have to maybe amend that application accordingly to reflect the comp permit.
Well, I think it depends on whether this project meets the density requirements as it is, and if it requires any type of dimensional relief. But my understanding is that for a multi-household land development project, that there's a reduced density, and it's 15,000 for the first 2 dwelling units and 5,000 for each additional. So I believe you've designed it so it meets the density requirements, right, Josh?
Correct.
And dimensional.
Yeah, and because it's considered one lot, where we were able to achieve dimensional requirements with setbacks and coverages as well.
Right.
So maybe that's more of where I was confused or thinking that we wouldn't need to be a comprehensive permit. I don't know if that's if we're agreeing on that now, or we know. But
I would just add that I was under the impression that this was going to be a permit from its conception. We can work through the details at a later point.
okay.
I did look at the density. The density appears to check out, although I didn't see it on your plans. I think the architect took a stab at it on maybe the next page.
So Jay, you're right in that when we came in for a pre-app, it was a comprehensive permit.
Mhm.
And I believe afterwards, me, you and Scott met and I thought came up with the idea that we could do it without having to do a comprehensive permit because there seemed to be some response from the neighbors that prefer not to see a comprehensive permit.
Okay. And you're going forward under the premise that it's a multi-household land development project?
Yes, that's my understanding.
And what's the difference between this one and the last one in regards to the definition?
Jay, it depends who the client is.
The same client.
I know,
Yeah.
that's the problem.
Same engineer, same design.
Jay, I figure I gotta win one of them, right?
That's it.
Yeah,
That's it.
again, at the planning board, I believed we were going to test the cottage design in the comprehensive plan application. I think that was originally the way it was played out.
Yeah, Steve, I think you're correct. When we were there, we didn't know that we had another avenue, I don't think, but the fact that we did still test the cottage design within this project, I don't think has any bearing on whether we end up needing the comprehensive permit or not. You know what I mean? We haven't created any necessary relief or waivers that I'm aware of, unless something changes, based on trying to put forth some of the aspects of the cottage zoning into this plan as a land development project, if that makes sense. Again, unless other people feel differently, that was the impression that I had. And then again, after reviewing this plan versus everything else, I think, long story short, what I'm saying is the cottage principles fit within the development project, again, without pushing us into an area where we needed relief.
I think the board was excited to see a cottage design example and how it would work, even though we don't have that ordinance fully in place.
Right.
So we'll resolve what the permitting queue as we
Yes.
move forward. But if we,
Okay.
we'll start with engineering with Rich and John.
Jamie, if you don't mind, just a couple other points, if I can, on the plan. I just wanted to compare the notes from pre-app with some of the changes that you see here. So everyone's aware, when we were at pre-application, again, we had a different building count and a different number of units. So what we've done is we've made the change to what you see here as far as 7 new buildings. The one existing dwelling in this situation, we were asked to provide some details originally because it's currently a single family unit, and the pre-application plan proposed that would get turned into a duplex. So I think members of the board were asking what that renovation would look like and how we would establish that space. So we've since had the architect, again, in revising the layout, have that existing structure just be renovated as a single family dwelling. And in this case, renovating really means some cosmetic things on the inside and out. So that building will stay as a single family unit. That was one of the items. Another issue that we were apprised of had to do with the decks that were shown on the units and their proximity in the setback or to the setback lines around the perimeter. So what the architect has done in this scenario has made some clear revisions to the building footprints, and the decks are now located in different locations, mostly on the sides of the building, to avoid any issues with the setbacks and the buffering around the property. I'm just following along my notes from last meeting. The board expressed interest in the cottage, as we just said, not to beat the dead horse, so to speak, but looking at the draft cottage ordinance, paying attention to some of its principles, seeing if we can marry some of those items into this plan, which has been done by the architect. We were asked to look at the private road and determine that we'd have adequate maneuvering for emergency vehicles with the hammerhead, which has been confirmed on our end based on the dimensions and the layout of the roadway. We also, again, took away the lot lines, which there were some questions on the sizes of some of the lot allocations that were 3,000-4,000 square feet in size of lot area. So we no longer have the lot lines, and it's treated as a land development. So that issue sort of resolves itself. And aside from that, from a pre-application standpoint to a master, we've shown just a little more consideration for how the utilities would lay out in this scenario, with a public water connection or main extension from Columbia Street, as well as a sewer main extension, probable gas service coming in, and the use of low impact development techniques for stormwater control, including the vegetated swales, dry wells for the roofs, and bioretention infiltration areas on site. So those are just a couple more highlights, again, on the somewhat technical end, although same scenario as the last application. The specific design components and calculations obviously have not been finalized or thought through 100% at this master plan stage.
To Rich and John.
Yeah, my initial concern is I'd like to see some cross sections on the road. There's a lot going on in utilities in a pretty narrow space. I'm worried about separation between the various utilities.
Yeah, we can do that, John. I mean, we have 18-foot roadway. We have a water and sewer. We know they've got to be a minimum of 10 feet apart. And then aside from that, gas and electric. But because we're doing sheet runoff without curbing for drainage, we're sort of creating some space back in the corridor that, I agree, normally with an 18-foot roadway with all of the utilities, including storm, would be challenging. But we tried to use the drainage as a way to eliminate that infrastructure, allow for more space for the other utilities. But we can certainly develop a typical cross section.
Yeah, again, even without the drainage, it's gas, telemetry, electric, water, sewer. It's tight. I don't know if you're going to fit it or not.
And be cautious that if you're using swales for infiltration, I'm not sure how that's treated against the water line and whether you're required separation. I think there is, but you're calling for, I thought I saw it, swales. I thought I saw a call off on one of these plans for swales for infiltration or something, or vegetated. Right. I don't know that, I think you just got to be careful of that. That's all. But, this is another one, Josh, that, this is on the edge of what RIPDs would require, but, you're going to be all over that site for the existing house. You're removing a driveway, you got a sewer line and, the garage and all those things. So, I mean, you're within a couple thousand square feet of it. Again, I think it requires RIPDs.
And I'm okay with that, Rich. I don't have any
All right.
issues. putting
And as
together
well,
a site package and sending it out to them.
Yeah, and along the same lines as the other one, because there's so much residential here, please address the 100-year on peak flow and volume. And yeah, I mean, you've got it shown in the back. I know this is, I believe it, Union Studios, it appears, created this, but you know, that's in the higher parts of the site. But whether it works or not, it's tough to say at this point. Obviously, it's so conceptual, but
Right.
but anyways, that's all I got to say.
Probably my primary observation, Josh, is the 2 units, G and E. Unless you got a Mini Cooper, you're probably not gonna meet the turning template to back that car out and then turn down the main drive aisle in
Okay.
that cross section for the road. You would actually have to back out of the driveway proper, back to the center of the hammerhead, and then make your turning movement.
Yep.
Right, I was hoping to get down.
I don't know if that was the plan or it's an oversight
Okay.
between, you know, an aesthetic architectural layout and the functionality of the 2 spaces.
Right. I see that. Yeah, we could make a modification, at least definitely on G, to slide that driveway to the east, south. Yeah, okay, I see your point. It's well taken.
Yeah, parking touching a property line with no buffering, or a drive aisle touching a property line. And again, realizing this is a schematic, but you may need to look at the buffering at the end of those 2 drives and then accommodate for snow load. The other aspect is your turning movements for your fire apparatus show that they're going to be off pavement. So I'm assuming you're going to do structured, reinforced, either turf and grass paved 2 or some other program there.
Yes.
And right now, again, design engineering versus architectural rendering, that may conflict with what you're calling your vegetated swale. This means that needs to probably move inland a little bit more and off the edge of pavement. If the edge of pavement's going to be structured.
Okay. Understood.
Otherwise, you meet a lot of the components that are contained in the newer version of the cottage regulations.
Amy, this is Chris. I have a couple comments, if I may.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris.
Josh, on the NFPA access diagram with the turning radiuses of the fire trucks, there's a proposed fire hydrant at just about at the left corner. Is that correct? Because it's not showing on the one to the right. So according to the legend, that little red dot is a proposed fire hydrant.
If you look on the site plan, proposed site plan, it's on the southwesterly corner. Is that what you're saying, Chris? So let's just look at to the right-hand side where the road makes a T, literally on the page to the right-hand end of the T is where the hydrant's set up for right now.
Okay, so that was my second point. You had one in that position, and then the diagram to the left of that with the yellow streets, there's one in the bottom left-hand corner. Right there where we're at.
Yeah, so that, I believe off the survey, that is an existing hydrant, or?
So the existing hydrant is, no, it's it's between Hope Court and School Street would be the existing hydrant, so.
Okay.
So with the proposed hydrant at the end of the line.
Yes.
And I would much rather see that at the beginning of Wakefield Place. So
okay.
It would serve all of the houses. You definitely should be able to get your 600-foot distance to the building if it's at
Correct.
the corner. Confirm that so that if it has to go in one house lot, it can. The big thing is if we don't want to have to drive by a house that's on fire to go get to a hydrant. So
Got
we've
it.
done this in other
Understood.
projects where we put it at the beginning, as long as you don't have to put two in there. So if you can put one somewhere along the beginning of that road, preferably on Columbia Street, because then it would access more houses. I just don't have any dimensions other than that your lots, the lot size is like 330 by 140 or something.
Yes, so that's the total lot depth, Chris, is about 330 feet from Columbia to the rear property.
Yes.
So that confirms your point. If we're out in the front, the longest run to a building, 300 feet at the most.
Yeah, that'd be great then. That's
Okay.
perfect. That's the best place. It serves us much better. We'd rather drop the hose at the end of at the beginning of the street and drive up.
Okay, sounds good.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Josh, at conceptual, you were showing some parking in that end of that hammerhead. I think you were showing 3 parking spaces, so you've eliminated those.
That's correct.
Did that go into the open space, or where did that area go?
Yeah, the parking spaces itself became part of the park and neighborhood area. I know, I look back at my notes and we could always add something in, but we had the visitor parking along the road and it conflicted with the emergency vehicle access.
Okay.
So we were asked to do, to make sure we met it. And that was one of the things that physical parking would have conflicted. So that's why you don't see that there.
Okay. Overall, what's the length of most of those driveways?
The length of a
Are they
majority of the.
Are they only going to fit one car?
You have a spot for basically two cars, because it's about 40 feet. And what they've done is they've put an additional pervious grass surface area, like a grass pave, for optional parking out at the head of each driveway. If they need to fit more than 2 vehicles in the driveway.
Okay.
Yeah, which is, I think, an element of the cottage zoning as well. So I kind of talked about that with the architect, in the sense that, I was like, well, we need to make these a little bit longer, but instead of just showing it as like the typical hard surface, based on the cottage with the smaller unit sizes and whatnot, it was more of a consideration for a little bit more green space that could hold parking if needed. Makes a little bit tighter footprint for everything on site. So as far as impervious surface and whatnot, so.
All right. I like the idea that there's a possibility for more than one car to park at a.
Yes.
I mean, that makes up for the 3 you eliminated in the visitor parking.
Correct.
So, yeah, I'm more comfortable with that.
Jamie, I have one other thing. It's Chris.
Go ahead, Chris.
Josh, you're proposing 18-foot driveway. Is that what you're calling it?
Yeah, it's a
driveway?
private road. Yes.
All right, because the NFPA 1 says that fire department access roads need to be not less than 20 feet. So I would call that more of an access road than a driveway, because your driveways would be serving individual. You certainly can call it a private road and not be a town road, and not have to conform to the town road specifications. But I don't see anything in NFPA where you can have anything less than 20 feet for a fire department access road.
Okay. All right, we can make it wider. We've got a consideration, the way this is illustrated, of about 30 feet in total to accommodate what's necessary for the access, for the utilities, for the swales. So we could pretty easily grab 2 more feet and make it a 20-foot width.
Excellent.
Okay.
Chris, just a quick question for you. I've had a couple developments that discuss this over the years, and I think it talks about 20-foot load bearing. So And again, I'll refresh my memory on that. I haven't dealt with this for probably 3 years right now on an affordable housing project in another municipality. I'm just asking the question, would you be comfortable with an 18-foot travel way with load-bearing shoulders?
Don't see that. It doesn't say you can't do that.
Okay.
All it says is that we need to have 20-foot fire department access road. So if you can provide a unpaved area where the fire trucks could still drive on, we've done it so that they put a specific mesh under the grass, and that could be a
grass
fire
paved
department
too.
access road. So yeah, that's fine.
Because again, they're trying to balance needs, aesthetics, architectural, deliverables. So that's why
I get that. Sure, as long, the biggest thing is that the cars aren't parking on both sides and not allowing the fire apparatus and the emergency apparatus to get through. That's the whole point of that 20-foot. So if there's cars on one side, we can still get by on the other side.
Correct.
So if we have to drive on, knowing that we can drive on the grass, as long as it's, it's built to that, it should be fine.
You just keep in mind wintertime when you got snowbanks. I don't know if they're gonna be plowing that full 20-foot width, so
They would still have to plow out, yes.
just throwing that out there.
You got a good point, John.
Which brings up my last point, Josh, is did you look at snow storage specifically in the Hammerhead? Or are you going to remove snow from the end of unit E and J? Sorry, G.
Yeah, I think two things. One, if we take this illustration and when we develop it into more of a design plan, I think we'll be able to accommodate at the end of the hammerheads, once we make a revision to the driveways, some snow storage. There's also some possibility of storage in the corner of the park area. Other than that, if we have to, we'll have to consider a maintenance plan that includes removing the snow from the site. But we can give more consideration. Like I said, we'll make the amendments going forward to the driveways at G&E and maybe create us some more space for some allocated snow storage.
Again, I know your balance in design principles versus utilization and functionality.
And shape, configuration of the existing lot, trying to, blend everything together. But we'll dedicate some areas on the plan as we develop the engineering site plans.
Go to David, if that's okay with everyone.
Jamie, if I can just bring one more point up.
Absolutely. Yep.
So fire department access roads shall be designed and maintained to support the imposed loads of fire apparatus and shall be provided with an all-weather driving surface.
Okay.
So, however that's designed, like John said, it needs to be able to be plowed so that we can get up there when we need to.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. David?
Jamie, at this stage, I'm fine. I'm, eager to see more detail like everybody else, but I'm fine. Thanks.
Maria? Maria, there you go.
I'm fine as well. Just also would like to see more detail and keep in mind that in other types of subdivisions such as residential compounds, and I'm sure it will be the same for cottage zoning, we do need to take care that we are trying to design based on the site and the size of the lot and use, and not necessarily get too far ahead of ourselves in terms of road widths and so on.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else that has a comment?
I will just add that since this is a multi-household land development projects, there are standards that are outlined in the subdivision regulations for that.
And Jay, did we, again, if this doesn't go under comp, we need to look at waiver requests potentially?
Correct. Such
So
things,
John,
I
do you
believe,
have that?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Kenyon, do you aware of that?
Yes, I am. One of the issue with the multifamily household land development project actually came up on one of the projects we discussed earlier, which involved Scott Hallberg, which was Kelly Way. And the previous planners required 3-unit structures on that in order to meet the multi-household land development definition. And looking through it now, I'm not sure why that was. So I'll discuss this more with Jay and Amy as far as the applicability of that.
John, it may have had to do with the fact that it's in the SMD.
It might have. And regarding the waivers, I know there's a 100-foot setback from a public road. I don't know how that would apply to this, if it's a private road for the internal circulation, if those outside lots would need to have 100-foot.
I'm going to attempt to quickly summarize everything. I think I have 8 items right now. Cross-section for the road as it relates to utilities, swale and potential effect on the water line, DEM permitting, and also with that, looking at the 100-year peak flow and volume. 4 turning movements associated with units G and E. 5 structured turf to accommodate fire apparatus. 6 buffering on the road. 7 hydrant locations and 8 fire access. Is that a fair summary? With that, I would entertain a motion.
I had one quick question, comment.
Okay, Maria.
If this is deemed to be a multi-household land development project as opposed to a comp permit, that would change the time requirements for review, correct?
Correct.
Slightly.
A
Yes.
little bit.
So I would ask the applicants if they remain as open as possible in terms of the amount of time that we have to review this, so that we can have the best possible outcome, because as you know, this is a very important development as it relates to a cottage style project.
Sure, we will keep that in mind.
Does anyone have a motion?
I think Maria makes a good point. I mean, this is the first example of a cottage design. And we want to make sure we get it right to show the best side of it. So that having said, Jay, is this going to be complete, even though we don't know how we're classifying it?
No, that will be part of the review process and working with John and Amy to figure out, to make sure we're comparing apples to apples amongst the applications that are pretty similar. So my goal is to get the items that are on today's agenda complete by the end of the week. That might be a tall task, but it's what I'm shooting for anyway.
Okay. Jamie, what, you're looking for a motion to move this forward to the planning board?
Yes.
Okay. Based on our discussions today and the requirements that were brought up, I'll make that motion.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Rich. Any discussion? Hearing none?
Just for clarification, it's going to be subject to certificate of completeness by Jay, is that correct?
Yeah, all of these apps are, John.
Okay.
It's a required step. It cannot move forward under the regulations without that certificate. Triggers a host of timeframes. All in favor?
I,
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
And thank you, everyone, for your patience today.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Almost tonight.
It's almost tonight.
Okay, we got a couple hours. We have another one.
Right.
Maria and Steve, we'll see you in a few hours.
For sure.
Again, thank you for everyone's participation. Chris, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks. Have a good day.
All right. Bye.
So I guess the meeting's adjourned.
Are you all set on the, tonight? Are you running tonight or is Jamie? Oh, you both there?
We'll both be there.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. We'll see you then.
See you tonight. Have a